Walter Block, superb economist and libertarian of Loyola University, joins us on this show, Unlicensed Philosophy, for the fifth time. So you have officially been the most frequent guest on this podcast, Walter. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's an honor.
Yes, and unfortunately, the reward is only honorary, so I cannot send you anything material.
You're sending me stuff spiritual, which is more important when you have enough food and clothing and housing. So I don't need anything more from you than that.
That's wonderful. Okay. So as per our pre-show discussion, we've decided to do a rather unorthodox episode in that we can touch on his book written in 2009 titled The Privatization of Roads and Highways, Human and Economic Factors, which is an interesting text. You all should check it out. And he's also requested that we discuss Israel because as of this date, 13 June 2005, Israel has launched an attack against Iran's nuclear facilities. So, yeah. So, what happened?
Well, I also have a book on that with Alan Fuderman, published
Yes.
in 2021. So I've got both covered with a book. I don't know how well, but at least I've got a book on each topic. Let's start with Israel first because it's very much in the news. Israel just the other day attacked Iran, and it did three things. I think two of them purposefully, the other accidentally, although I don't have any inside information. This is just my surmise. The two purposeful were uh, first getting rid of the nuclear capacity of Iran because Israel doesn't really appreciate Iran having a nuclear weapon. Second, assassinating or targeting would be better. The leaders of the military, Iranian military, and also the scholars, the scientists who are working on nuclear capacity. And third, and here I think and I expect and I hope that it was more accidental than anything else, they did bomb civilian areas, and I would certainly have that. I don't know if it's true of Iran, but I know it's true of Hamas. And what Hamas does is they put rocket launchers and military hardware in hospitals and in residential areas and in schools. And then Israel has no choice if they want to defend themselves but to bomb a hospital or to bomb a school or to bomb residential areas, which is very bad. And so I think to the extent that Israel did that to Iran, it was either mistaken or very bad. But the first two, I think, are eminently reasonable to get rid of the nuclear capacity and to get rid of some of the military leaders. Why? Because Iran has said, death to the Jews, and not just to the Israelis, but all Jews. And I think Hamas and the other proxies of Iran also have that view that it's not just Israeli Jews or Israelis of whatever religion, because there are non-Jews in Israel who support Israel, and I think Iran and the other proxies would be bitterly opposed to them as well. It's Jews everywhere. So Iran has made credible threats. And I think, if I threaten you, then I'm going to punch you. And you don't have to wait for the punch to land. You can zap me in some way. Obviously, I'm not threatening you, but just making a general point. So I think Israel is entirely justified in doing what it did. And my only criticism, well, I have two criticisms of Israel. One, they should have done it way before. Uh, Better late than never, yes, but they should have done it way before. And two, they should have done more and better. Uh, the Iranians were able to release 100 drones. Happily, all of those have been shot out of the air. But still, Iran was able to release 100 drones, and Israel should have pounded them more strongly, so that they couldn't even release drones, that they couldn't do anything. I think what they did in the Six-Day War in Egypt, they just obliterated their air force while they were still on the ground, and that was the Six-Day War. And I hope that this is a 6-hour war. Although if it was 6 days, I wouldn't be too upset. And regime change occurred in Iran, and the new leaders of Iran stopped saying, death to Israel. I wanted to make one other point, and that is a lot of people say, well, the U.S. shouldn't help Israel. Well, nothing wrong with allies, and allies are supposed to help each other. But in this case, it's really more the mouse helping the elephant. You know the joke about there's an elephant and a mouse on top of the elephant, and they go across the bridge, and the bridge starts swaying, and the mouse says, "We made the bridge sway." Well, Israel is a mouse, the U.S. is an elephant. I mean, don't no disrespect to either, of course. But here, remember, Israel is only the little Satan. Who's the big Satan? The big Satan is the US. So now Israel, paradoxically, is helping the big Satan, or the mouse is helping the elephant. Israel is helping the US because Iran doesn't much like the US either. And it dislikes the US more than it dislikes Israel, even though it's been attacking Israel. And just one last point. According to most analysts, Israel has the fourth most powerful military on the planet. The first three in no particular order: US, China, and Russia. And then comes Israel. So Iran is not up in the top 10, and Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis are not anywhere. They're just, I don't know, a bunch of hooligans. So that would be my opening remark on the Israeli situation. I have more to say, but I'll give you a shot to respond, and then I can continue.
Certainly. You may recall that our first conversation, and with also the participation of Alan Fuderman, was on your book, The Classical Liberal Case for Israel, which I'm currently revisiting. It's riveting with every page. So I would recommend that to everyone to read as well. Um,
Thank you.
so, my I received the news with a certain sense of concern in that I sort of know that this was going to happen. You know, I think that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. However, it's my belief that all diplomatic options to achieve that objective has not been exhausted. I believe even a few days prior, Donald Trump, the president, is in the process of negotiating with the Iranian government so as to keep them away from the nukes. So the attacks, I believe, may jeopardize that situation, or it may help. I don't know. I'm far from a geopolitical expert. So your thoughts?
Well, I think that's a very good point. Donald was, if I can be informal and call him Donald, Donald was negotiating with them, but there's a problem, and that is, I forget what the technical expression is, days before they can get a nuke. And the days before they can actually get a nuke based on what they've done with uranium it was closing. And according to some estimates, it was not in the months or even the weeks, it was more in the days. And they could get a nuclear weapon before this diplomatic process concluded, or was right in the midst of. And secondly, I don't trust the Iranians, even if they agreed and there was a treaty and they promised not to have a nuclear weapon. Iran's a big country. Israel is a tiny, tiny country, as big as New Jersey. Iran is, I don't know, as big as Texas or much, much bigger, and there are mountains all over the place. And they could agree on their treaty not to have nuclear weapons and still have nuclear weapons. So even if the uh, diplomacy succeeded, and Iran agreed not to have nuclear weapons, I don't know that I trust them not to have nuclear weapons. And secondly, I think even more important, uh, the window of opportunity was fast closing. And they kept prevaricating and they kept saying, well, we don't want to have direct talks, we want to have indirect talks. And the process was going on and on very slowly. And I mean, as Netanyahu said, we, the Israelis, are a sovereign country. We can protect ourselves without any permission from anyone else. And and they did it. So I don't see why they have to get permission from the U.S. They're an equally sovereign country. I don't say they're equal in many other ways, but they are both sovereign countries, and sovereign countries can act and may act properly to preserve their safety. And Israel, I mean, I'm sure Israel was rooting on Donald's attempt. They weren't opposed to it, but they don't have to get permission from the U.S. Uh, to do that. So that would be my response to that very important question about the diplomatic efforts. One, even if they succeeded, I don't know how much I trust them. And two, Israel doesn't have to get permission. Whereas if Israel starts bombing here, there, and everywhere, I trust that a lot more than I trust Iran to not succeed in developing its nuclear weapons.
Mhm. Okay. So this is another thing that I've heard from a friend of the show and someone you know too, Alan Dershowitz. He said that under the laws governing war, the scientists who are working on these nuclear weapons are also fair game. They can be counted as military targets. So for me, it'll be the equivalent of, say, if the Japanese launch an attack in on U.S. soil, they can bomb Los Alamos, and J. Robert Oppenheimer would be a fair target. So, why do you believe that this is the case?
Well, there was this movie, I forget what it's called, maybe Reds or something like that. And it was about a journalist who was pro-Russia, a U.S. journalist who was a commie.
Yeah,
And
John Reed, right? 10 Days That Shook the World. You
that's
wrote
it.
that book.
That's it. Thank
Warren
you.
Beatty
I'm
plays
glad
that plays him. Yeah.
that's, yes. And the actor in the movie who was portraying, I guess it would have been Stalin at the time, and he was asked, which would you rather have, one John Reed or 50 professors to promote whatever it is, communism? And he said, John Reed in a mile. So I now ask you, who would Iran want to have more, a uh, a nuclear scientist or 50 soldiers? Or five generals or something like that. And I think a case can be made. I mean, I'm an economist. We have to look at marginal versus average versus total and all that. But I think a good case can be made that one nuclear scientist in Iran is more important than five generals or 50 soldiers. Don't hold me to the numbers, but I'm trying to say that those nuclear scientists are very, very important in the Iranian attempt to obliterate Israel. And if Israel wants to defend itself, it's sort of like, again, you're threatening to punch me. Or was I threatening to punch you? I forget. I think I was threatening to punch you. And the question is, should you punch me in the nose or should you punch me in the pinky? Right? Well, the nose is a much more better place for you to punch than hitting my pinky, because if you hit my nose, well, take this. My fist can do more damage than my nose to you. If I hit you with my nose, I'm not going to do much harm to you. If I hit you with my fist, I will do a lot of harm to you. So where should you punch me? In the fist? That's silly. Or in the nose? Obviously, punch me in the nose. Well, the nose is more like a scientist, and the fist is more like a soldier or a general. So I think on a pragmatic basis, Israel is certainly justified in going after the most important enemies, like the nose rather than the fist. But how about on a moral basis? Well, look, let's try again. I'm now going to rob a bank, and I've got five people. And the four of you go in and rob the bank, and I'm the getaway driver. I didn't do anything wrong. All I did is I drove a car and I stopped, and I'll pick you up after you guys rob the bank. Am I fair game? You're darn certain I'm fair game, even though I didn't shoot anyone. Just because they have all the scientists did, they didn't pull any triggers. The driver is part of the gang and should also go to jail and be guilty of murder if the gang members shoot somebody to death. So I think that would make it not only on a pragmatic or a utilitarian point of view that the scientists are fair game, but also on an ethical point of view, an ethical perspective, a legal perspective. I didn't do anything wrong. I just drove a car, but I to rob the bank and kill the bank guard. Well, similarly, the scientist, all he did was, do science. He didn't, do anything bad, so to speak. But just as the getaway driver is guilty, so is he.
Okay. Well, I guess my rebuttal, so to speak, is that hypothetically we could just spare the scientists and maybe make them useful in either the Israeli nuclear program or the American nuclear program if they so choose. If not, we'll try them for, war crimes and such.
No, I don't think that's much of a pushback. I think we're now on the same wavelength that
Okay.
look, it'd be better. I mean, if instead of killing them, we could recruit them
Yeah.
for good. And look, they're scientists. They could be professors of physics or whatever. I think it's a stretch to say that Israel shouldn't assassinate them or target them because they might turn out to be good guys. Well, right now they're not good guys. Similarly with me, I'm the getaway driver for the gang, and I could be a good taxi cab driver, let's say, but still I'm guilty of something very bad.
hmm Yeah, certainly. Okay. So another point I'd like to address is the idea that Iran, the Islamic Republic, does not act according to the laws governing nations. It may be the case, but I wonder to what extent does that justify, bending or even violating the laws of nations in order to deter Iran from their evils?
Well, what laws of nations are you thinking about?
No, I suppose the common libertarian principle of non-aggression. Um, yeah.
Yeah, but Iran is doing aggression. Uh, Remember, I'm punching you, and you're defending yourself. Iran is doing all sorts of aggression, uh, not so much directly recently, more through its proxies. Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas have all been obviously guilty of and Iran is inspiring them, inciting them, funding them, leading them. Uh, you know, Again, I'm going to punch you and I'm going to say, well, it's just a fist. It wasn't me, right? Uh, my fist is my proxy. My fist is like the Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and I'm Iran. And I said, well, I didn't do anything. And as I punch you, well, no. The fist is part of my body, and Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas are part of the Iranian whatever system. And so they have been creating destruction on Israel. I mean, you don't even have to refer to October 7th when Hamas killed, what was it, 1,200 people, which is a very high proportion of Israel, which is only 10 million people, 9 million people. And then they kidnapped another 250, and they still have, I don't know, 35 hostages that they're holding. And I blame Hamas, obviously, for that, and Houthis and Hezbollah also for sending over rockets. But I also blame Iran. Iran is not innocent of the depredations imposed by its proxies, the HHH for short, Triple H. So when someone would say, "Well, Iran isn't really initiating violence," even if there were no Triple H, they're threatening it. They keep saying death to Israel. They have with signs, death to Israel, and that's supported by the government. And if you listen to what they're saying, it's death to Israel. Well, look, if I say I'm going to punch you, and you initiate and you first punch me, you're justified because libertarianism doesn't only prescribe actual physical violence, it also proscribes threats thereof. So if I say I'm going to punch you, you have a right to kick my butt because I shouldn't be threatening you. Unless it's in a movie or a play or a hypothetical that we're now talking about, when I say I'm going to punch you, I mean, we know I'm not really threatening you. But if I really threatened you with that, you would have the right under libertarian law, as I understand it, to initiate violence. You could be the first one to use physical violence. And I didn't, all I did was a threat. And I say, well, free speech. No, it's not free speech. Well, it is, it isn't, and it isn't. Namely, I'm not a absolutist on free speech. I'm a big supporter of free speech, but there are certain speaking acts that are illegal. One of them is a threat to do violence against someone else. Because look, I come up with a gun at you and I say, "Give me your money or I'll shoot you," and you give me your money. I didn't do anything. All I did was threaten you. Well, no, that's not quite right. I did something criminal by pointing a gun at you and by saying, "If you don't give me your money, I'm going to shoot you." That's not kosher.
Mhm. Certainly. Yeah. So I believe we are a couple of days away from the anniversary of the war in 1967. So the Six-Day War, as you mentioned. I think it lasts from the 5th to the 11th, something like that. The timeline's a bit fuzzy for me. But as far as I can remember, Israel launched a preemptive strike, I believe, against the Egyptians, and we now consider it to be, just. So, give us a bit of a history lesson on why it was justified during that time.
Well, Egypt was threatening Israel. It's that simple. I mean, look, Israel didn't launch any bombs at Liechtenstein. Israel doesn't attack New Zealand. Israel doesn't attack Argentina. Well, Argentina is an interesting case because Javier Milei, the president, is very pro-Israel. So that's an unfair issue. But Israel doesn't just indiscriminately shoot rockets everywhere. Uh, Look, in 1948, Israel started, and it was one day later or 1 hour later, I don't know, seven armies or five armies all attacked Israel. And ever since 1948, there have been pogroms and shootings and suicide bombings and this and that. And Israel is just trying to defend itself. And Egypt, nowadays, happily, Egypt and Israel are not enemies. But at that time, in 67, they were enemies, and Egypt was threatening Israel. And Israel, I think, just shot out all of the airplanes of the Egyptian Air Force while they were on the ground, which is a lot easier than dogfights in the air, and pretty much handcuffed Israel, and that's why handcuffed Egypt, and that's why the war ended so quickly. But again, I think we've established, at least to my satisfaction, that a threat is a justification of violence. And Egypt was threatening Israel then, and Israel was quite in the right to offer a preemptive strike. Just as if I threaten you and you punch me first, all right. I wanted to add another thing, and that is that the another pushback argument against Israel could be Israel stole land from the Arabs, and we libertarians believe in private property rights, and the Arabs are just trying to get back their land. And what's wrong with that? So the Arabs are in the right because they're trying to rectify land theft. And if there was land theft, then I would have to agree that the Israelis were in the wrong and the Arabs and the Triple H and Iran were in the right. And even though Israel is more powerful than them, still Israel is the bad guy. And the source of land theft is two. One, what happened right after 1948, and the other is what happened historically 2,000 years ago or whenever. So let me address each of them. In 1948, what happened was the 5 or 7 armies that invaded Israel sent out a message to all Arabs, all Palestinians in Israel. And the message was, get out, go away. Because if you stay there, it's going to be harder for us to slaughter the Jews. Because, then we have to shoot over here and not there because you're over there. And, just go away, go on vacation, get out. And in 2 weeks, we'll wipe them all out. And then you come back in and we'll go from there. And a lot of them did that. And I call that treason. I mean, if you cooperate with and by the way, 20% of the Israeli population is not Jewish. It's Christian, it's Islamic, Arab, Druze, whatever. And now, so they all left, and there were about, I don't know, 800,000. The numbers are unclear, a little less than a million. Maybe 800,000, maybe 900,000. Some people say 750,000. The numbers don't really matter. It's just a lot of people, almost a million people left. And then guess what happened? The 7 or 5, I'm not sure about that either. There's dispute as to how many armies came in. Let's say 5. They were all defeated. And now the Arabs wanted to come back. And Israel said, over my dead body, you're coming back. And now that's the charge of land theft. Well, I say that that's not really land theft. And a lot of the Arabs in these camps that they've been assigned to, they have keys to their property in Israel, and they can't get back, and they're very upset about that. But the point is that they were traitors. They obeyed the foreign armies. So it's justified that they lose their land because they were traitors, they were criminals. Second point on this is at around the same time in 1947, 1948, there were many Jews who lived in Egypt, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, here, there, and everywhere. And guess what? Around the same number of people, a little less than a million. And they were not traitors. But what happened is that they all moved to Israel. Why? Because there were pogroms in these countries. Now, what should have happened, what might have happened, is a land swap. Namely, all of the Jews who took over the Arab lands in Israel should have been given those Arab lands in Israel. And then all of the Palestinians or Arabs who left Israel in 1948 should have taken over the Jewish property. Probably the Jews would have lost out because their lands were more valuable, but it was roughly the same number of people. Also, a little less than a million people. Now, the argument against this is, well, we can't be collectivists. We have to be individualists. My ex-friend Hans Hoppe said that in a debate that he and I had, not you and I, he and I. And I think he's confusing methodological individualism with political individualism. Methodological individualism, I'm an Austrian economist. Oh, yeah, I agree with that. There's no such thing as a group apart from the individuals who make it up. Fine. But if all the people in the group leave, there's no group left. There's no group apart from the individuals. I agree totally and enthusiastically. But political collectivism is a different sort of a thing. And I think that Hans is confusing the two of them. Political collectivism is very different. It's justified. We do have groups that own things. The condo association owns the hallways or whatever, the swimming pool. The Indian tribes, uh, they they didn't really own things individually. They own things as a tribe. There are partnerships. So I don't see why this suggestion of mine, namely that the Jews take over the lands left by the Arabs in Israel, and the Arabs who left Israel take over the Jewish lands in Egypt and Syria and everywhere else. Instead, what happened is that the Arabs wouldn't allow the Arabs who left Israel to integrate into any country. Instead, they put them in these gigantic what do you call them? I forget the name of what they call them, but the miserable tent cities. And why do they do this? To show the cruelty of Israel. Well, Israel integrated its Jews. The Arabs didn't integrate their Arabs. So I don't think Israel was cruel or untoward in any way. Okay, so that's the first land theft claim. The second land theft claim goes way back before 1948. It goes to I don't know. It goes to maybe 1850 or 1900, and during that period, the Arabs outnumbered the Jews in Israel. And people were saying, well, Israel just stole this land from these Arabs. And I go back a little further. One of my problems with Murray Rothbard's analysis of this is he only goes back to 1850 and 1900 when the Arabs were more populous than the Jews in Israel. I go back a little further and I say, who was there first? And here I pay homage to the libertarian saint on these issues, John Locke. And what did John Locke say? He said that the rightful owners of property under dispute are the first homesteaders. So who were the first homesteaders? Who were the first people there who got kicked out by the Romans and who got kicked out by the Ottomans and who got kicked out by all sorts of other people? They were the Jews. And one, how shall I say it, bit of evidence on this is that the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque lies above a second temple, which lies above the first temple. Well, one edifice lies above the other, which was there first? Obviously, the one underneath. So the Israelis were there 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, which leads me to another issue. What's the name of it? Statute of limitations. Now, there is such a thing called the statute of limitations. What's the statute of limitations? The statute of limitations is after a certain period of time is over, all bets are off. I punched you 30 years ago, no, 31 years ago, and the statute of limitations on this is 30 years. And now they come to arrest me for punching you 30 years. I don't even think you're 30 years old, but that's another issue. You look younger to me than that. And they come to arrest me, and I say, tut, tut, tut. The statute of limitations is run out and on assault and battery, 30 years, and now it's 31 years. And we agree on the facts, stipulate. Well, that's the statute of limitations. And libertarians are against statutes of limitations as far as I'm concerned, because I punched you 30 years ago and now it's 31 years ago, and I admitted it and I should be punished. That doesn't seem very just. Now, there is such a thing called the natural statute of limitations, which I agree with. What's the natural statute of limitations? The natural statute of limitations is the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. Possession is 99 or 90% of the law or 9/10 of the law. So the Arabs are there and they're saying, well, we're there and Israel stole our land. And I say there's no legal statute of limitations, only a natural one. And the natural one is that the burden of proof is on the Jews. The burden of proof is on the Jews to say, well, we were there first, and you Arabs came in after the Arabs kicked us, after the Romans and the Ottomans kicked us out, and you took our land. We were there first. And in my assessment, the Jewish claim of the natural statute of limitations does not apply because we have good evidence that we were there first. The Jews were there first. I'm Jewish. I'm not an Israeli, but I sort of feel a part of that group. So, and it's not only the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa um, mosque and the Second Temple. It's all over Israel. Different countries have different sports. In Canada, the big sport is hockey. In the US, the big sport is football. In many European countries, it's soccer. Do you know what the national sport of Israel is? Archaeology. They're forever digging here, digging there, finding pottery, and they find that the Jewish stuff was deeper than the Arab stuff. So I'm making the point both in 1948 and then in 2,000 years ago, there was no land theft. The Israelis are righteous. They have the right to the land. Um, and that would be my view on that pushback that the Israelis or the Jews are in the wrong because they stole Arab land. No, they didn't steal Arab land. The land belongs to the Jews.
Mhm. Okay. Well, my guess is that we won't be able to get into the roads and highways privatization argument. So I guess that will have to be tabled for another time.
Okay, well, the Israeli thing is a little bit more
Yeah, it's
relevant
more timely, obviously.
and
I
more
can understand.
time. That's right.
Yes. I'm sure you're familiar with the text, "The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem," right, by Benny Morris. He was the one that uncovered the fact that 700,000 to 800,000 Arabs had to vacate their land. Um, and I believe after 2000, he revised that book, The Birth of the Palestinian Problem Revisited, wherein he concluded that, well, had not the Arab nations surrounding Israel declared war on the nation state, then no refugee problem would be possible. So, yeah, I guess if we can entertain counterfactuals, if the seven Arab countries didn't declare war on Israel, would the 700,000 to 800,000 Arabs still have their lands there? Still, their children, their grandchildren can stay there? And in additionally, the Jews of these other dispersed countries, they will, if they so choose, can still live and have kids and grandkids in these lands.
Well, there are two people, Benny Morris and Ilan Pappé.
Okay. Yeah.
Pape, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right. I've only read about him.
Yeah.
Stand corrected by you, that make the point against Israel. Pape is still anti-Israel, but Benny Morris is heroic, a better scholar than Pape, because Benny Morris agreed initially with Pape that the Israelis were in the wrong. And he had the decency, the courage, the scholarly attitude to change his mind. Look, I think that's what a good scholar is. If he sees that he was wrong, he says, I was wrong, sue me. Nobody's perfect, and we're out after the truth, and I changed my mind. So I salute him in a way that I can't salute Ilan Pape. But I think that this hypothetical that you're mentioning is absolutely correct. Um, yes, if Israel had started in 1948 and the Arabs saying threw out the welcome mat instead of the artillery mat and said, "Welcome to our family of nations. We'll trade. We'll get along. We'll become the Hong Kong of the Middle East together. We'll have prosperity." Then those almost 1 million people, 800,000 or so, would have been Israeli citizens. And instead of Israel having 20% of its population being Arab, it might have had 30 or 40% of its population being Arab. And maybe not, because maybe the Jews from Russia would have come in and the Jews from all these disparate Arab countries might have come in. So maybe the non-Jewish population of Israel would have been 30%. It's hard to know exactly what the numbers are, and there wouldn't be people in these camps that they'll lead miserable lives. Yes, I think that's a very good hypothetical, and I wish it had occurred. They say that Israel wants to take over lands. The greater Israel, that's the criticism of Israel. Israel doesn't need other lands. Israel can expand upward. Do you know Manhattan Island is a lot smaller than Israel? And during the day, or rather at night, there are about 8 million people in Manhattan, which is just a little sliver of real estate. Do you know how many people are in Manhattan during 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? 25 million. They come in from New Jersey, from Long Island, from Connecticut, from everywhere. Where do they go? They go upward, up into skyscrapers. Well, if there were peace, I would predict, hypothetically, that Israel would start looking a little bit like Manhattan. Instead of engaging in money for warfare, they would have engaged in money for peace. They would have expanded vertically into skyscrapers, and now there'd be plenty of room. I mean, it's as big as New Jersey, and in New Jersey, if New Jersey were at peace and a lot of people moved to New Jersey would look like Manhattan. So I think you're making an excellent point that had there been peace from 48 on and no enmity, Israel wouldn't be expanding into Syria and taking over the Golan Heights. Why are they taking over the Golan Heights? They need more real estate? No. They're taking over the Golan Heights, which is a little bit of Lebanon or Syria or somewhere up there on northeast of Israel, and they're shooting rockets down into Israel. So of course, Israel is not too happy a camper with that sort of a thing. So I think that your hypothetical is a beautiful hypothetical. If I had a machine and I could turn us back into history and I could implement your hypothetical, I would have done it. A lot of people who, uh, a lot of Einsteins, a lot of Mozarts, a lot of Johann Sebastian Bachs who were killed would still be alive. Uh, every human life is precious. And the Arabs have seen fit to implement a system where many human lives were lost. So I think your hypothetical is beautiful, and I thank you for it. And I never thought of it before. So I'm very grateful to you for mentioning that to me.
All right, that's wonderful. Glad I could put a smile on your face during these tough, difficult times.
Yeah.
So, continuing on this hypothetical, as Benny Morris implied in, The Birth of the Palestinian Problem, it is very likely that the Palestinian national movement will not happen had it not been for this displacement experience. So, if everything work out well, Israel gets established, and its nearby neighbors agree to live and trade with it in peace, there wouldn't be a Palestinian national movement. And I think that for Palestinians, it may come off as rather troubling.
Well, look, the Palestinians have been offered a separate state many times, the
Yeah.
Oslo Accord, and they keep rejecting it. Look, Israel left Gaza in 2005. And between 2005 and 2007, the PLO, not Progressive Labor Organization,
Palestinian Palestinian
Palestinian,
Liberation Organization. Sure.
right, having a little bit of a fracas with Hamas, and Hamas kicked out the PLO. The state, they had a Palestinian state. It wasn't called a Palestinian state, and a lot of people say it was just so Hamas kept shooting rockets. But for all intents and purposes, Hamas a Palestinian state of its own called Gaza. And what did they do with that? First of all, they wrecked all of the Jewish properties, and the Jewish properties had things like greenhouses and factories and stuff, and they just bombed them. Which, okay, I'll forgive them for that. They don't like Jews, fine, let them do that. But they had a lot of money coming in, and they had a lot of concrete and a lot of metal. And what did they do with that concrete and that metal? They built tunnels, not for transportation, but to launch suicide bombers. Did they build hospitals? No. Did they build desalination plants? No. Did they build what Donald wants, Mediterranean tourist places? It's right on the Mediterranean area. They've got nice beaches. No, they didn't do that. They invested in bombers. So they had a Palestinian state for all intents and purposes. And look what they did with that. And what the Jews would have liked is for peace to occur. And if peace occurred, there'd be no open air prison. The Jews wouldn't try to bollocks them in. Uh, as I say, they don't do that with Liechtenstein. They don't do that with Monaco. They don't do that with Argentina. They're a peace-loving group. If you mess with them, they're not very peaceful, but they don't initiate violence. They are the recipient of initiatory violence. So they had a separate Palestinian state. And look what they did with it. They just used it to, and they're a mouse, and Israel is now the elephant. So this is really Meshuggah, crazy in Yiddish. It's like a 5-year-old kid attacking, I don't know, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, a heavyweight boxer, champion of the world. You and I, the two of us, if we attack Mike Tyson, he'd put us on our rear end because he's very powerful. Well, Israel's very powerful. Hamas is not that powerful, and yet they're so driven. They have a covenant. And what does their Hamas covenant say? Death to all Jews. Not death to Israelis, just all Jews. Why? Because I don't know, we're evil or something. We're an abomination. Hitler did a great job, but he a good start. No, he didn't do a great job. He had a good start, and according to Hamas, we're going to finish what Hitler started. Well, what are you going to do when you live next door to people like that? Well, you get the Iron Dome, so you can stop most rockets. And I'm not even sure that that's a good idea. On the one hand, it's a good idea because it stops rockets. On the other hand, they should have gone in and pulverized Hamas long before. That's my big criticism of Israel, apart from being socialist for the first 20 years of its existence. Nowadays, thanks to Netanyahu, they're not as socialist as they were. They're not laissez-faire capitalists yet, but they're moving in that direction. So this is just crazy. I wanted to mention one other thing about October 7th. What was happening in Israel before October 7th? What was happening in Israel before October 7th was mass marches of lefty Jews. Why were they protesting Netanyahu? Because Netanyahu wanted to make the Israeli Supreme Court more like the American Supreme Court. In the American Supreme Court, when somebody dies or retires, who picks his replacement?
The
Well,
head of
the
state, the
president.
president. Yeah.
The president does with the permission of the Congress.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of democracy, namely the electorate of the U.S. gets to pick the makeup of the Supreme Court, not directly, but indirectly through the political system. What's it like in Israel? In Israel, when somebody dies or retires, guess who picks his replacement? The extant Supreme Court. Can you imagine? So the Supreme Court in 1948 was very lefty because everyone was very lefty. All this Histadrut and labor and commie nonsense. The Supreme Court was very, very left in 1948, and it still is. Why? Because they keep replicating themselves. They keep repeating themselves. Whenever one of them retires or passes away, that they pick somebody else just like them. And Netanyahu was saying, that's not democratic. Democratic means that the Jewish, rather the Israeli electorate, have some sort of connection to who is the Supreme Court, and the Knesset would pick it. And the Knesset is democratic. It's run. Its makeup is based on the on an election. So you have masses of people protesting that Netanyahu is undemocratic and that the present system is democratic. Now, look, I had a full head of hair then, and look at me now. I pulled out all my hair in frustration because this is the opposite of democracy. So anyway, I won't say you're having a civil war in Israel, but I won't deny it either. And there were a lot of military people in the IDF who were saying, we're not going to participate in the army unless Netanyahu stops doing this. Now, how does that look to Hamas? Well, the best time to strike your enemy is when they're fighting each other. So I don't say it was definitive, but I do lay a little blame on the left Jews in Israel who were bitterly opposed to Netanyahu making the Supreme Court more democratic on the ground that he was making it less democratic. Which, I mean, Jews are supposed to be smart. We're supposed to have the highest IQ of any other group, but there's a lot of mishigas, a lot of craziness going on here. And also, while I'm attacking my fellow Jews, what about the fact that what is it? 85% of Jews vote Democratic? And except for the Orthodox Jews, most Jews vote for Biden or Obama and not for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has done more for the Jews than any other 10 presidents. The Abraham Accords. He's moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel. He's supported Israel in many, many ways. I mean, Biden and Obama were sort of nasty to Netanyahu when he came over to talk to them, and they keep talking about taking him out to the woodshed and giving him the what for. Uh, so I'm very puzzled by the fact that there's so many self-hating Jews in Israel and in the U.S. and wherever there are Jews, they're sort of still socialists and opponents of Israel. Milton Friedman, who doesn't count in this regard, who was magnificent, he said that free enterprise has done more for Jews than any other system, and yet Jews are bitter opponents of free enterprise. And he was not only puzzled, but unhappy about this result.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, I'm not Jewish or not Jewish enough to get involved in the intra-Judaic disputes, but I do know that historically, Jewish people in Europe were known as merchants. It was not until the modern era do we see a lot of Jewish who are secularized begin to identify themselves as socialists.
No, you're right. And the reason Jews were merchants is because many other occupations were closed off to them. And the reason that Jews are associated with jewelry, not because of the first three words, first three, not words, the first three
letters.
letters. I'm losing my marbles here. I'm getting senile. Words, letters, was because we keep getting kicked out of all sorts of countries. And if you own real estate, it's hard to take the real estate with you. You can't put it away. Whereas if you own diamonds, you just put them in, your pocketbook and or your suitcase, and now all of your fortune is with you. You're much more mobile. So yes, Jews have been associated with finance and usury, and I don't know, diamonds and rubies and pearls and stuff like that. Part of the reason is because we keep getting kicked out of countries. We keep getting kicked out of countries because, I don't know why we killed Christ or like that. I don't know. There's this sort of hatred that is amazing and appalling and hard to understand exactly why. But that's the reality. So yes, we are known as merchants and bankers and also tax collectors. in Russia and in many of the Eastern European places, the Jews were in charge of tax collecting for the noble because that's the only the Jews could get. And not unnaturally, everybody hated the Jews because they were the tax collectors in behalf of the owners. They didn't keep that money, but they turned it over to the nobles. These for some hatred, it's uh, sociologists should discuss this instead of what they mainly wokeism.
Mhm. Yes. I'd like to end on this note. I don't think we should underestimate the virulence of anti-Semitism in the world. It took over Europe in the 16th and 19th century, which is why the catastrophes happened. The Shoah happened.
20th, 20th century too.
Yes, yeah, the 19th and 20th centuries. And in the 21st century, it has taken over the Arab world, despite the fact that some Arab countries have made peace with Israel. I know that the UAE, United Arab Emirates, or while the other moderate Arab countries have started producing textbooks that teach the Holocaust, which is a good first step. But there are still like bookshops all across the Arab world where anti-Semitic texts like the Protocols and Mein Kampf were distributed and translated into Arabic, which I think is appalling. And I wonder, what can we as non-Arabs do to rectify this issue?
Well, let me first push back at the word appalling. I think that it's good to translate these scurrilous readings. I think we should maybe not cram them down the throats of 12-year-olds,
Mhm.
but scholars should be able to read protocols and Mein Kampf and stuff like that. I'm not for not translating and not studying this stuff. Uh, but apart from that, I think you're making an excellent point, and I regard that as a typographical on your part. Uh, uh, what can non-Jews do? Well, I don't know. The UN, which is mainly composed of non-Jews, has accused Israel of war crimes and other genocidal stuff more than twice as much as every other country on the planet. Let me repeat that. Israel is guilty of more war crimes than twice as much as every other country on the planet. I advise non-Jews, and by the way, there are many Christians who are Zionists, and I welcome them and appreciate them. And my response to all non-Jews, non-Arabs, the judge, to be a good referee and not to be biased against Israel.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful note to
Well,
end on. Yeah.
yeah, delighted to be with you. Um, uh, Please stop the recording.
Right. Yeah. Thank you again, Walter Block, for joining the program.
Take care.